All right, buckle up, because today's deep dive is going to be, well, essential. We're talking airway management. Got an EMT textbook chapter here, and honestly, looking it over, I realize I take breathing for granted. Like, a lot.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? You assume it'll just work until it doesn't, and then it's all you can think about.
Exactly. So let's unpack this chapter, get to those oh wow moments, because this whole breathing thing is way more intricate than it seems.
Oh, absolutely. Ready to dive in.
Let's do it. Okay, first things first, got to map the territory. Chapter goes deep on the whole respiratory system, from your nose all the way down to those tiny air sacs, the alveoli.
And it's amazing, right? How much is happening in just breathing in and out. So let's take that journey with the air, shall we? Start simple. Inhale, nose or mouth. Seems straightforward enough.
Totally. But I'm guessing it gets more involved than that.
Oh, way more. Doesn't just float down to the lungs nice and easy. It's a whole process.
Yeah.
So air enters, down the pharynx it goes, past the larynx, that's your voice box area, then into the trachea. Most folks know that as the windpipe.
So it's like air's following traffic signals, specific routes to get where it's going.
Great analogy. And just like a highway branching off, the trachea splits too. Becomes two bronchi at a point called the carina. That split super important. Make sure air gets to both lungs evenly.
So that's the carina, like the grand central station of breathing, directing traffic, left lung, right lung.
Exactly. But the journey is not over yet. Each bronchus keeps branching, smaller and smaller, those are bronchioles, forms this whole network like tree roots, reaching every part of your lungs.
Wow, so not just one path, it's this whole highway system inside us.
Precisely. And at the very end of those tiny airways, that's where we reach the alveoli.
The tiny air sacs we always hear about, what's so special about them?
They're the key to it all. Think millions of tiny balloons all clustered together, each one surrounded by capillaries, those super thin blood vessels. And it's there, at that little meeting point, that the magic happens.
The magic meeting.
Oxygen from the air you breathed in, it crosses over into the capillaries, while carbon dioxide from your blood goes the other way into the alveoli to be breathed out. Happening millions of times a minute, that's what keeps our cells alive.
Mind-blowing. Happening at this microscopic level, and we don't even think about it. Perfectly synchronized or something. But what's driving this whole process? Don't consciously tell ourselves to breathe, right?
Nope, not willpower. Body's got this built-in system, keeps us going most of the time anyway.
Okay, so how does it work? Give me the basics.
All right, so picture this. Underneath your lungs, big dome-shaped muscle, that's the diaphragm. When you breathe I in, diaphragm contracts, flattens out, makes more space in your chest.
Like pulling down on a plunger, making room for air to rush in.
You got it. Not a solo act, though. Intercostal muscles, those are between your ribs, they contract too, expanding the chest even further. That expansion drops the pressure inside your lungs lower than the air outside.
So air rushes in like nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Exactly. High pressure to low pressure, physics in action. Exhaling, though, that's more about relaxing. Diaphragm and those intercostal muscles, they chill out, chest gets smaller, pressure goes up, pushes the air back out.
Wow. So simple yet so sophisticated. Inhale, contract, negative pressure. Exhale, relax, positive pressure. Out goes the air. Beautiful.
Beautiful design, yeah. But there's a little nuance, this chapter points it out. Not all the air we inhale actually gets down to those alveoli for the gas exchange. Some stays in the airways leading up to them. We call that dead space.
Dead space. Oh, that doesn't sound good. Is that bad?
Not at all. It's normal, just how it's built, but it is something to be aware of, especially when you think about like breathing techniques, how to be more efficient, or how even a small blockage can have a big impact.
Okay, now that is getting interesting. Think you understand breathing, basic stuff, then bam, whole other layer.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so cool, because next we're going even deeper, those what-if scenarios when things go wrong, like those other courses you sent on cardiology and trauma. Airway management, it's huge E in those situations.
Oh, right, because if your heart's not beating right or you've had a bad injury, breathing's often the first thing that gets messed up.
Exactly. It's all connected. And that, my friend, is where we're headed next. Get ready, because we're about to find out what happens when this whole breathing symphony gets out of tune. It really is amazing when you think about it. So many things got to be working just right for us to breathe without even thinking about it. Like a finely tuned machine, multiple systems, all got to be in sync.
Yeah, and like we were saying, any one of those systems goes down, throws a wrench in the whole thing.
Exactly.
So let's talk about those wrenches. What can mess up this whole breathing process?
Oh, got to start at the top. Literally. The brain. Brainstem specifically, that's where your breathing rhythm comes from. Something goes wrong there, whole system can go haywire.
Like in those medical dramas, right? Head injury, everyone's freaking out. Will they breathe again?
Exactly that. Damage to the brainstem could be trauma, stroke, whatever. Messes with the signals going to your breathing muscles. No good.
Wow, so something so vital, but also so fragile.
That's the thing, right? And then there's this concept, ventilation perfusion mismatch. Sounds fancy, but it's pretty intuitive.
Okay, break it down for me.
So for good gas exchange, you need enough air flowing into the alveoli, that's ventilation, and enough blood flowing past those alveoli, that's perfusion. Got to be balanced.
Like two gears,
Yeah.
perfectly mashed, one dries the other.
Exactly. One gear's off, whole thing's messed up. So good airflow, but bad blood flow to the lungs, maybe a blood clot's blocking things, oxygen can't get where it needs to go.
And on the flip side, you could have plenty of blood ready to pick up oxygen, but if the air can't get to the alveoli, like something's blocking the airway, that's as bad.
You got it. Choking, severe asthma, even a collapsed lung, all about that mismatch.
Man, this is intense. Making me very aware of my own breathing right now.
It's wild, right? And we haven't even gotten into the external factors that can mess with breathing.
There's more. Like what?
Well, altitude's a big one. Higher you go, thinner the air gets. Less oxygen available with each breath. That's why people get altitude sickness. They're literally starving for oxygen.
Makes sense. Body's good, but it's designed to work best within a certain range, right?
Remarkable, isn't it? But also means that even small changes, inside or outside, can have a big impact.
Which is why it's so important to recognize when something's off. What are some, like, red flags? How do you know if someone's struggling to breathe?
Gotta know the normal first. Healthy adult, breathing's about 12 to 20 times a minute. Should have a regular rhythm, chest rising and falling evenly, quiet and effortless. Anything way off from that could be trouble.
So too fast, too slow, struggling to catch a breath, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Listen to the sounds, too. Wheezing, gurgling, any high-pitched whistling, those can mean a narrowed airway. Look at their skin color, too. Bluish tint around the lips or fingertips. That's cyanosis. Means their blood oxygen is low.
Okay, so those are all things you can see and hear. What about technology? We got all these gadgets now. Anything that can help assess breathing.
Absolutely. Pulse oximeters, those little things they clip on your finger at the doctor's office.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Those measure how much oxygen is in your blood, basically. It's called oxygen saturation, or SpO2 for short.
And what's a good reading?
For most folks, just breathing regular air, 94% or higher is what you want to see. Anything lower, especially if it keeps dropping, could be a problem.
Handy little tool then. Quick snapshot of how well someone's breathing.
Super helpful, but they're not perfect. Things can throw them off, bad circulation, cold fingers, even dark nail polish. And they don't tell you everything.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, say someone's been poisoned with carbon monoxide. Pulse oximeter might show a normal reading. Can't tell the difference between oxygen and carbon monoxide, see? So tech is good, but gotta use your judgment too.
Good point. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's say it's clear. Someone's really struggling to breathe. Airway's blocked. They're in distress. What do you do?
Okay, first things first, don't panic. Assess the situation. If they're conscious and they can cough forcefully, that's actually good. Means the airway isn't completely blocked.
So let them cough it out. Body's working on it.
Right. Sometimes best thing you can do is let the body do its thing. But if the cough is weak, or they can't cough at all, or you see more serious stuff, turning blue, losing consciousness, then it's time to act.
And that's where abdominal thrusts come in, right? The Heimlich maneuver.
You got it. For a conscious adult or a child old enough choking can't cough, that's the gold standard. Use that trapped air in the lungs to force the object out.
Like we talked about before, it's physics.
Exactly. Super effective when it's done right. But there are times when you can't do abdominal thrusts, like if they're unconscious.
Which makes sense. Don't want to hurt them while trying to help. What do you do then?
That's when things get a bit more, well, we'll get into it right after this.
All right, so we're talking those situations. Someone's unconscious, airway block, can't do abdominal thrusts. What's the plan?
Yeah, those situations are critical, to say the least. Every second counts. Gotta act fast, but carefully, too.
EMT training, I imagine that's where it really comes in handy. Knowing what to do under pressure.
Absolutely. So first thing, make sure they're flat on their back. And if you haven't already, call 911, obviously, or your local emergency number, or whatever it is.
Right, get the pros on the way ASAP. But while you're waiting, what can you do?
Start by opening their airway. Gently tilt the head back, lift the chin, helps move the tongue out of the way. That's a big one, especially when someone's unconscious.
Right, the head tilt chin lift thing.
Yeah. But gotta be careful here. If you even think there might be a neck injury, spinal injury, fall, car accident, anything like that, don't move their head or neck ATOL.
Makes sense. Don't want to make things worse. So what do you do in those cases?
That's where the jaw thrust comes in. Don't tilt the head back. You're going to kneel above them. Use your fingers to gently push the jaw forward, like lifting it up towards the ceiling. Opens the airway without messing with the neck.
Gotcha. Okay, so airways open as best you can. Then what?
Now you got to check their mouth, see if you can see anything blocking, food, whatever. If you can see it, you can try to get it out, finger sweep. But, and I can't stress this enough, don't push it further down.
Yeah, that would be counterproductive.
Understatement. Out, not in, that's the goal. If you get it out, they start breathing, awesome. But if not, or if you can't see anything, can't get it, gotta be ready to start CPR.
Which, like we talked about earlier, ties into all of this. It's amazing how knowing these basic life-saving techniques can really equip you for like a whole range of situations.
That's the thing, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And this chapter does a great job of highlighting those connections, makes you realize even if you're not an EMT, knowing this stuff can make you a more confident first responder if you ever need to be.
Right. And speaking of EMTs, this chapter also gets into some of the tools of the trade, so to speak.
Yeah.
Things like those oral and nasal airways, and of course, oxygen therapy.
It's like a whole toolkit for breathing emergencies, right?
Yeah.
You got your basic airway adjuncts, like you said, or pharyngeal airway, that's the mouth one. Nasopharyngeal airway, that's the nose.
Right. Those curved plastic things keep the tongue from blocking everything up.
Exactly. And then there's oxygen, of course. We tend to think oxygen good, more oxygen better, but as this chapter points out, even oxygen's got its limits. Too much can actually be harmful in some cases.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me too. Never thought of oxygen as something that could be, too much of a good thing.
Right, it's about balance. But the big takeaway is oxygen therapy, done right, it's a lifesaver. EMTs, they're trained to know how much to give, what method to use based on what the patient needs.
Man, it really makes you appreciate just how much goes into every breath we take. This deep dive has been, well, eye-opening to say the least.
It's incredible, isn't it? This whole system working silently, keeping us alive.
Absolutely. Well, sadly, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive on airway management. But as always, there's so much more to learn, so much we didn't even get to. But hey, maybe next time.
Definitely worth another dive.
Until then, listeners, stay curious and keep breathing. We'll see you next time.